Emily Hayes walked down the marble staircase of her sprawling mansion, her heels clicking against the floor as the afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The world saw her as the epitome of success, graceful, poised, and wealthy beyond imagination. But deep inside, Emily often wondered if all the wealth and luxury truly mattered. Was it possible that, despite everything she had, she was missing the one thing that couldn't be bought? She sat at the grand dining table alone, gazing at the array of untouched gourmet dishes prepared by her personal chef. Across from her sat Jake Miller, her boyfriend of 2 years, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. Jake had entered Emily's life like a whirlwind, charming, confident, and always the life of the party. At first, he had made Emily feel alive in ways she hadn't experienced in years. Their relationship was a fairy tale, full of glamorous trips to Paris, endless shopping sprees, and luxury yacht getaways. But as time went on, Emily noticed that Jake's enthusiasm often seemed tied to the luxuries they enjoyed, rather than to her as a person. Emily sighed quietly, her thoughts swirling with doubt. Was Jake truly in love with her, or had he fallen in love with her lifestyle? She had worked hard to build her fortune from nothing, but recently she began to feel like little more than a walking bank account in Jake's eyes. The extravagant lifestyle that once symbolized freedom now felt like a golden cage. Across the table, Jake shifted uncomfortably. He had always been a confident man, but recently, guilt had started to eat away at him. He had entered the relationship with Emily, fully aware of the privilege that came with dating someone as wealthy as she was. In the beginning, it had seemed harmless. Who wouldn't enjoy the perks of dating a millionaire? But now, after 2 years, something had changed. Somewhere along the line, he had started to feel ashamed. Jake glanced up at Emily, noticing for the first time how distant she seemed, and wondered if she felt the same way he did. Disconnected, unsure, afraid to confront the elephant in the room. The story took a turn the night Jake found himself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. His conscience was heavy, and the lavish lifestyle he once found intoxicating now felt suffocating. Was he with Emily because he loved her, or had he been blinded by the convenience and luxury her wealth provided? In the middle of the night, Jake couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind racing. Images of the two of them at fancy galas and on private jets flickered through his memory, but none of those moments felt real anymore. What was real was the laughter Emily shared when she was with her friends, the warmth she brought to the people she helped through her charitable work. What was real was Emily herself, kind-hearted, driven, and a woman who gave without expecting anything in return. Jake knew he was at a crossroads. If he stayed with Emily, he had to figure out if he could love her for who she truly was, beyond the wealth and power. But if he couldn't, he knew he needed to let her go. As the days passed, Emily and Jake's relationship grew increasingly strained. Their once lively conversations had become stilted and awkward. Emily felt as though Jake was pulling away from her, and deep down, she feared that her worst suspicions were coming true, that Jake was more interested in her bank account than her heart. It wasn't just the fancy dinners or the extravagant gifts. Emily had noticed how Jake's eyes lit up whenever they discussed money, investments, business opportunities, or her latest acquisitions. The emotional intimacy between them had evaporated, replaced by cold, calculated conversations about finances and assets. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Emily finally confronted Jake. "Are you still in love with me, Jake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heart pounded in her chest as she waited for his response. Jake looked at her, his mouth opening and closing, unsure of how to answer. He hadn't expected the question to come so suddenly, and in that moment, he realized he didn't have an easy answer. He had feelings for Emily, yes, but were they feelings of love or of obligation? "I don't know," Jake finally admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "I thought I did, but lately I'm not sure if I'm in love with you or with your lifestyle." Emily's heart sank. It was the answer she had feared, but hearing it out loud was like a punch to the gut. She stood up abruptly, unable to contain the flood of emotions that washed over her. Anger, betrayal, sadness. They all surged through her, leaving her breathless. If that's how you feel, then maybe we need to end this, Emily said, her voice trembling. She hated how vulnerable she sounded, but she refused to let Jake see just how hurt she was. Jake stood frozen, watching Emily walk away. Part of him wanted to chase after her, to apologize, to tell her he didn't mean what he said. But another part of him, the more selfish part, knew that this was the moment of reckoning. He needed to figure out what he truly wanted, and that meant letting Emily go. For now. The weeks following their breakup were difficult for both Emily and Jake. Emily buried herself in work, throwing herself into her charity projects and business ventures, trying to fill the void that Jake had left behind. But no matter how hard she tried to distract herself, the loneliness persisted. She missed him, despite everything. Jake, on the other hand, found himself grappling with his own demons. He had always been driven by ambition and the desire for success, but for the first time in his life, he realized that money wasn't everything. The job offer he had received, one that would have paid him more than he'd ever dreamed, no longer seemed appealing. What was the point of having wealth and success if he didn't have someone to share it with? He thought about Emily constantly, not about her wealth, but about her. The way she laughed, the way she cared for others, the way she had made him feel, even in their most intimate moments. Slowly, Jake began to realize that his feelings for Emily were deeper than he had initially thought. It was a rainy evening when Jake finally made his decision. He couldn't live with the regret of not trying to make things right. He had made mistakes. He had let greed cloud his judgment. But now he was ready to prove to Emily that he loved her for who she was, not for what she had. Jake arrived at Emily's mansion, soaking wet from the rain. His heart raced as he rang the doorbell, unsure of how she would react. When Emily opened the door, she looked surprised but not angry. There was a softness in her eyes that Jake hadn't expected. "I made a mistake, Emily," Jake said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I let greed get in the way of what was truly important. But I'm here now and I want you to know that I love you. For you, not for your money or your lifestyle. I don't care about any of that. I just want you." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, to protect herself from the possibility of getting hurt again. But another part of her, the part that still loved Jake, knew that he was sincere. Without a word, Emily stepped aside, letting Jake inside. They stood in the foyer, both drenched from the rain, staring at each other in silence. "I missed you," Emily finally whispered. "I missed you too," Jake replied, his voice full of emotion. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Jake worked on rebuilding their relationship. They talked openly and honestly about their fears, their desires, and their hopes for the future. Jake made it clear that he was committed to Emily, not her wealth, and Emily, in turn, began to trust him again. Their relationship transformed into something more genuine and real, built on love, respect, and a deeper understanding of each other. They learned that love couldn't be bought, and that true happiness came from being with someone who loved them for who they were, not what they had. As they stood on the balcony of Emily's mansion one evening, watching the sunset, Jake took her hand in his and smiled. "I'm glad we found our way back to each other," he said softly. "Me too," Emily replied, her heart full of love. And in that moment, they knew that their love was stronger than any material wealth.